Now coming back to again the Foundation for Future Cities, I think I think I've heard whatever research I have done, there are two programs that have been quite talked about, not just Hyderabad, the rest of the country as well, and that is one is the citizenship for I think the first one happens to be Citizens for Cities program, other one is Sculpt Your City program. Can you take us through what has been, what was the visioning for these two programs and what has been experienced, and also maybe the outcome?
Okay, let me actually, maybe we should speak about the context in which we
Exactly,
are working.
exactly.
Now let me just give a few facts and why we had to actually think of something on these lines. If you have to, let me just talk a little bit about the context of Indian urban system. I mean, Indian urban system is the second largest in the world. We have more than 5,000 cities or urban areas, and these urban areas contribute something to the tune of 70% of the gross domestic product.
Right.
So cities are actually the economic engines of growth. Cities can be called as the money bags of the nation. So it's very important that we nurture the cities. It's very important that we preserve the cities. So we started looking at cities from a different perspective. But if historically you go back and check, India has never really openly embraced urbanization. India is typically called a reluctant urbanizer. India never welcomed urbanization, and that's why it was not prepared to, accept urbanization when it happened.
Right.
And that's why our cities are extremely chaotic because they have not been planned.
Right.
We never, in India, we just looked at our, how did we define our life? We said, India
lives in rural areas.
India lives in its villages.
Right.
India's heart
Right.
is in villages.
70% of the people live in.
Economy is tied
Right.
to rural India.
Right.
And if you really go back and check, they're not wrong in that perception.
Right.
Because in the year 1950-52 types, if you look at the economic profile of the nation, 50% of the gross domestic product came from agriculture and agricultural products and services.
Right.
But today, where
Exactly.
does it stand? It is
Bottom.
13.7.
Right.
13.7 this fiscal,
Right.
2013.
Right.
So obviously there's been a decline in the contribution of agriculture.
Right.
So the economic profile of the nation is changing, which means urbanization has picked up, and our almost 56 to 58% of the GDP is contributed by services, which are completely city-centric. And when all this is happening, our government was sleeping.
So it is completely unplanned.
Completely unplanned. So our cities started bursting at seams, some of the bigger cities, because if you look at a city, what is a city?
Right.
A city is the hub of entrepreneurship.
Right.
A city could be the hub for innovation.
Right.
So people keep coming into the cities seeking jobs, seeking schools, seeking good healthcare.
Absolutely.
So obviously the in-migration is pretty much a global phenomenon.
Right.
It's happening all over the world, but more so in the developing world now. If you look at the West, they have urbanized, and urbanized pretty well few decades ago.
Right.
But in India, it's happening now, and we have not been prepared, unfortunately. So
Also,
we are-
also does in this entire unplanned urbanization and all that. I mean, has it got also to do with the spurt in population growth? Because suddenly you find, I mean, in rural areas you don't find that opportunity, so therefore they have to go and seek some employment in the
exactly.
road.
So
they
it's
become.
It's not population growth per se, but it's lack of opportunities in the rural areas
So that is
that
prompted.
attract people to the cities.
Right.
And by the way, it's again not a unique phenomenon to India, it's a global phenomenon. It happened
Absolutely.
all over the world. And another interesting thing, I mean, which perhaps we all have to acknowledge is that whenever urbanization has happened, the economy of that particular nation
Right.
has gone up.
Right. Absolutely.
And so we have to see everything in
There's
the
a
right
correlation,
perspective.
yeah.
First, we talk about globalization that led to industrialization, led to urbanization, motorization. So
Right.
obviously there's opening up of economies and industries, and
Right.
then urbanization, then economic. It's a virtuous spiral that has happened.
So, if I have to rephrase, and correct me if I'm wrong, and that is, there cannot be any rural-centric globalization, just the way I think maybe our forefathers must have planned. But it has to be urban-centric globalization, because if you don't open up this urban areas or the cities kind of thing, I mean, the kind of globalization let's say output of this globalization, you're not going to experience that.
Yeah, in a way, that is the trend.
Trend, that's
right
what
now.
we have seen.
But for your again, a little bit of information. What is happening in certain European countries is there's so much of stagnation in the
Right.
cities that they are trying to make city centers look attractive to pull back people from the rural hinterland. Because it's a two it's cyclical, as we know.
Right.
Who knows, maybe in 50 years agriculture would perhaps be the
Coming
biggest
back.
contributor to GDP. It can happen.
But, yeah.
But right now, United States has urbanized and is stagnated,
Right.
and most of the Europe is stagnating. Like even the growth, for instance, you take France is at zero,
Almost.
GDP growth. So
Japan
somewhere
has
there's
been
a
like
little
that.
bit of stagnation.
Right.
But in the developing world, especially in Asia and Africa, urbanization is really high. The rate of urbanization is very high.
Right.
So it is time now we prepare ourselves for the big boom that comes with
Right.
urbanization in terms of economic growth. I mean, why should we resist economic growth?
Right.
We will start loving our cities the minute we understand that they are the economic engines of growth, the backbone being, contributing, let's say, the money to the
Right.
economy. Then we have to plan our cities well.
Right.
We
So,
have to
so
invest
I
in
think one
infrastructure.
related question, maybe little digression here. Do you think had our cities been planned, or we had gone in for real urban planning as
Yes.
you define it? Do you think we could have grown even better in terms of economy?
100%.
Okay.
100%. I mean, there's no denying it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think we could have had a better demographic dividend as people talk about it.
Absolutely. You know why? I mean, if you really, there's so many things.
Right.
I'll just give you an example. I mean, I'm sure you recall in the way back. I think in the year 1998, 2000,
Right.
around that time. There is this Asian miracle.
Right.
We
Yes,
had,
absolutely.
we had Japan, Singapore,
Chile,
Thailand.
Asian
all of
also,
them,
yeah,
all of them
including
were
Chile.
really
Yeah.
growing, but India was not growing. It's because our young population, we didn't bank on them.
Right.
At that time, they were not bankable assets.
Asset.
But I doubt if they are bankable assets today, because we really have not capitalized on
And then we have not
their
really-
prowess or
yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think that is the key differentiator
So-
in most of the economies that have flourished at that time. Okay, now we need to start looking at it, and these are the economic assets.
Right.
I mean, a world of examples. I'll give you one example. Recently, I was just following the growth of African nations.
Right.
I think in Rwanda, they did economic profiling of the nation after the genocide, etc. And then they discovered that among all the assets that they have, women who constitute 50% of
In
the
the-
economy are economic assets, and started nurturing them. And today, their economy that was from negative is growing at 8%, even
Right.
better than China.
China.
Better
Right,
than
absolutely.
China. So a lot depends on how we really, look at our economic assets and how we define anything as an asset.
Right. So.